Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episode, and I think already different audience from World Talent Economy Forums. They already know about Mr. David Wood from UK and Mr. David Shumaker from USA. And even before starting these sessions, I start discussions with our honorable panelists that how we can do some interesting things together. And today we're going to discuss about this futuristic leadership. We get different kind of I'm sure they can give us different directions, guidelines, how actually futuristic leaderships actually grow. And yes, I'm sure our audience will get a very good guidelines that how they can develop themselves for 21st century. I want to start with Mr. David Wood. Hello sir, how are you?
It's great to be back on your show, Sharif.
Thank you sir, thank you sir. And Mr. David Schumacher, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you, and also wonderful to be here.
Thank you, sir. Mr. David Wood, I want to know from you that what does mean? You know that we have many audience from developing nations, especially youth community, even corporate bodies and the government peoples and the university. They want to know more about futuristic leadership. What does it mean? Can you give us detailed analysis on that particular point?
Well, it's a big topic, but it's an important topic, and let's discuss it step by step. You know, in the past, a lot of what people tried to do was to master a skill which they thought they could then use for the rest of their life. They would join a particular industry, they would be experts in one area, and that would find them. But in the future, instead of that continuation of things that are broadly the same, there's going to be much more variation, much more uncertainty. So the most important skill of leaders in the future is how to anticipate and handle uncertainty, not just to try and minimize variation. That was something I learned when I was younger, minimize variation, do the same thing again and again very reliably. We spoke about Six Sigma leadership, in which you didn't want things to happen differently. You wanted everything to be reliable, but that's not possible in the world of the near future. So we've got to cope with that uncertainty, and that's the start of futuristic leadership for me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, sir. Mr. David Schumacher, how do you want to analyze these futuristic leaderships? And we want to know more about USA present conditions. Yes.
Well, I think leadership itself is a big topic. Futuristic leadership, of course, is the specific topic. But I would say that leadership is the essential piece of that question. Wherever we're going, it takes leaders to help guide the discussion, to bring as many people into the discussion as possible, and to continue to look for the betterment of humanity as we move forward. Now, what I mean by that is we've always had leaders, and whether the leaders are looking towards the future or not probably had a lot to do with the time in which the leaders were born and operated. There was a time when history moved forward very slowly. Things changed very slowly. But here in 2020, even in the midst of a global pandemic and everything else that's going on, we can read every day about what new possibilities we have out there. So I think that the uncertainty that David Wood spoke of is absolutely correct, but it also is because we have so many different options today moving forward. How do we corral those? How do we bring interest around those and then move those forward in a way that's meaningful for society? So having the big discussion and letting people coalesce around the areas that they find interesting, I think natural leaders tend to emerge from that. Somebody becomes passionate about life extension. Somebody becomes passionate about artificial intelligence. Pick one of the many different areas that are there. The leader is the person that can't stop talking about it, that can't stop promoting it, and hopefully bring people together to the point where we can develop these. Part of my job with the U.S. Transhumanist Party is taking a look at innovations that are available out there today and making those actually known to people so that we can generate this excitement, we can have these discussions and move forward in a way that I believe is really meaningful to society. So it comes down to basic leadership as it always has been. We find ourselves, though, in an exponential run of technology. There's the uncertainty, and then that's the question for future leadership.
Thank you, sir. Like when you joins, our audience actually waiting for you. Even they call me, they ask me, and they text me. So Mahdi Hassan Mahmood, he said, "Hello, sir. I'm delegated to have you here. Thank you." And Araf Mehraz, "Hello, sir. Nice to see you again on World Talent Economy Forum. Hope it will be a great discussion today." And I think Alexandria. This is Mr. David. Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. Sir, like I want to know more because my students, our youth community, our researcher, they want to know more about these fourth industrial revolutions, and especially in that situations, actually, how leadership can play roles for developing for that particular fourth industrial revolutions related things, and they can implement these points. Yes, Mr. David Wood.
So a couple of the skills that I want to talk about are the skills of analysis and the skills of imagination. And the two of them need to go together. Analysis is figuring out what's possible. Imagination is figuring out what might be possible, something that wasn't considered before. And the two of them go together. Analysis is also figuring out which possibilities are desirable. And imagination is figuring out which possibilities might be desirable, despite initial inclinations otherwise. Because the fourth industrial revolution is going to put many possibilities in our hands that weren't conceived before. Things can be very different in the not too distant future. Let's take a look at this terrible pandemic, which we're now experiencing. Something remarkable has happened recently, which is that we have developed a vaccine for this outbreak. It's not yet finalized, but a great deal of progress has been made in less than a year. Research started in February, and we now have very encouraging results in November. So there's never been such a fast change before. But people are saying, well, we shouldn't be content with simply developing a vaccine for this coronavirus. More research should be done to have better antivirus technologies more readily available. So perhaps within another year or two, there may be vaccines available against all variants of infectious diseases. And that's a possibility which before could hardly be imagined. So then you've got to go back to the skills of analysis. This imagination, this possibility, how do you know whether it's just a fantasy, just some science fiction, a Hollywood film scenario? How do you know whether it's possible? Then you need to bring in a lot of people. You need to bring in people who understand about the science and the technology and the engineering. You need to bring in people who understand the economics and the politics. And to figure out what's possible, you need to bring in people from an artistic background, people with a religious background, a spiritual background, a philosophical background, different cultural possibilities. And we've got to bring all these people together, and then we can see more clearly what are the new possibilities which are possible and desirable, and then we can go there much more quickly than before.
Thank you, sir. Mr. David Shumaker, how do you want to analyze this fourth industrial revolutions, and specifically how actually leadership play a very good role for this kind of things?
Yes, exactly. So back to the fact that we've created this vaccine in a short period of time, I think is an excellent example. The reason I say that is that's never been done before, to have a vaccine available in 6 months to a year. Part of the burden of leadership in today is being able to help people with understanding that, to being able to accept that. Is it too fast? Is it too much like science fiction? Is it too much outside of my normal frame of reference as far as what I think is possible? And then does that bring up fears? Does that bring up fears of are we moving too fast? Why is this possible now when it wasn't possible 10 years ago? So when it comes to futuristic leadership, I think that's where uh, transhumanists, futurists, leaders have this opportunity to be able to tell the story, to explain to people why we're in this particular point of history and time, and that we're lucky to be here. And then a leader means going first. So be the first to start small, get your flu shot. It's flu season here in Arizona, or starting to be. I'll be one of the first people to take, if I'm available to, and I think I will be able to take one of the vaccines for coronavirus. I fit some of the demographics that I've seen that people say for that. So it's a matter of standing out there and as a leader saying, follow me. Here's where I'm going, and here's why I feel this is a good thing, and tell the story.
Thank you.
Perhaps we
Yes,
can
sir.
take a look at one particular inspiring leader, John F. Kennedy, the former US president. One thing he did, which is often admired, but which needs to be understood better, is he set out an audacious, bold vision. In 1961, he declared that America would send a man to the moon and bring them back safely by the end of the decade. But what makes him a great leader isn't just that he had the big idea. He took the time beforehand to discuss with many of his experts whether such a thing would actually be possible. He brought together lots of brilliant engineers and other scientists who did lots of trials and experiments. And then he set the big vision. More than that, he communicated it in a powerful language. He spoke once at the US Congress about it, and then his most famous speech in, I think, 1962 at in Florida, at Rice. He spoke in very powerful terms about, we're going to do this not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And he emphasized lots of the uncertainty involved. This wasn't something that was cut and dried. It wasn't something that was mapped out carefully in advance. There were lots of experiments that would need to take place to figure out exactly how to do it. But he set that vision. Well, I think in the same way, we leaders nowadays, we must set out other bold visions, which is that within, maybe not a decade, but within a generation or two, many of the worst aspects of humanity can be left behind, including our tendency to get old and senile and decrepit and degenerate, this failure in our biology, that can be left behind, including our failure to think clearly. We are too often dominated by rather foolish ideas. That can be solved within a generation or two as well. And then we have our inherited tendency to be selfish, to be egotistical, to envy others, to become depressed, often to become suicidal. That can be left behind too. In each case, the super longevity, the super intelligence, the super happiness is made possible not just by wishful thinking, but by actual study of what science and engineering is on the point of delivering. It's delivering a much better understanding of human biology and human psychology, human brain, and it's allowing us to figure out how we can make very significant changes. So there's the moonshot vision for the next generation or two. Let's get behind it.
Yes,
Thank you,
that's
sir.
a very excellent example. If I could just tag onto that briefly. One of the things I think that made that such an exciting announcement as well, too, is there was an air of danger to it, if you will. I mean, the whole idea of high performance aircraft, spacecraft, there was definitely a dangerous element to that. It was a dangerous world with the rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union at the time. But then there was also a personal danger for a political career. You have somebody that is putting themselves out there to say, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to move in this direction. And there's downside to that. The upside is where there's danger, there's excitement. And we can build on this excitement by painting a bold vision that, yes, that we have carefully looked at and understand what some of the possibilities are. But even doing that, it goes back to that uncertainty, is that we still don't know. You know, we want certain things, but we still don't know. So uncertainty, danger, and excitement, they all go together. And those are some of the things that leaders need to be able to manage to bring people along. It's the thing that not only do we understand intellectually, but it's something that we can take internally that builds excitement, that gets people to get up every morning and put one foot in front of the other and move forward for something bold. So I think that is just an absolutely great example, David.
Yes, thank you, sir. I want to take some audience response because these questions actually I want to ask to you. Humaira Tanzila, anyway, good morning, sir. Welcome to World Talent Economy Forum. Thanks for your time. And there is a specific question from Hosni Arafet. Hello, sir. Good morning, and great to see you again. What qualification will be required for future leadership? Yes, Mr. David.
Well,
I'm not sure formal qualifications will be so important. I think that it's actual the ability to learn quickly. So whatever qualifications you get at one time, probably they won't be entirely right for what you've got to do next. So to be successful, you need to be able to demonstrate that you can quickly learn new skills, that you are adaptable, that you are agile. Now, of course, qualifications are useful. They do indicate that you have some proven ability to learn and to focus and to concentrate and to show what you have learned. But in the future, the actual formal qualifications may be less important, and it's your ongoing ability to learn new and to form new connections that may be even more important. Rather than formal degrees, some people have talked about nano degrees. Nano is a bit of a strange word here. It means 10 to the power minus 9. So literally, it suggests it's only 1/1000th of the size of a normal degree. But the intention is this, that rather than focusing on getting a large qualification, you need to be able to quickly learn whatever skill is needed for a particular task. And you can do this increasingly from online sources. There are many online courses providers, and they will allow you to show a qualification, not for studying 3 years, but maybe 3 days. And in these 3 days of focus study, you can actually learn a lot and help you to do a particular task.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Mr. David Shumaker, what do you want to say about these questions?
I think leadership going forward will be a lot like entrepreneurship. Leading a small business, leading into the future has some parallels. You're in entrepreneurship, many times you're moving into an area that may not have been fully explored before. And I think that being able to bring as many viewpoints into the topic of whatever it is that you're trying to move forward in, whether it be AI or life extension or something else. It requires being able to listen to others, for yourself not always having the best idea in the room, to being able to being challenged by others as I start to lay out ideas that I think for the future. Someone else may have a different take on it that may be more right than what I initially had. And I think you see entrepreneurs move that way as well. It doesn't have to be them. It doesn't have to be ego. It does have to be wanting to move forward for a general betterment. Now, in entrepreneurship, perhaps how successful the business is comes down to looking at money and looking at contracts and looking at things like that. So you have ways to measure this. Nevertheless, all those things take a very broad perspective. And being able to have people from various viewpoints that you can harvest those viewpoints and then energize people to move together. So we're talking about being able to move forward into that unknown, but you don't have to do this by yourself, even as the leader, because you can bring in others to help as well.
Mhm. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. These questions actually, always, I get from the audience, and they ask me, "Hello, everyone. Onika Shams, thank you for your good questions. What is your advice for youth who are living in an underprivileged countries and dreaming of a future leaders?" Thank you. Yes, Mr. David Wood.
It's a great question. And it helps to have positive role models in mind. And I agree it can be harder for people in an underprivileged country to make progress than those who are born in a more privileged country, but it's still possible. And we can look at some of the CEOs of some of the world's most powerful companies. Let's look at Microsoft. The CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, grew up and was educated in India. The CEO of Google, Sundar Pichai, also grew up and was educated in India. Now, they had reasonably privileged backgrounds in these countries, but it is an example that people can move from a comparatively poor country and have a spectacular career. It's not just those at the top of companies. When I study people who have made progress with deep learning, again, they're based currently in companies such as Microsoft and Google and Facebook and Apple. But in many cases, they grew up in countries such as Vietnam or Latin America or elsewhere in the Middle East. And they were able to connect in their original countries to online sources. They were able to learn a lot by themselves, and they could go jumping forwards. Another couple of possibly inspiring examples. These aren't first-generation immigrants. These are second-generation immigrants. But if I look at possibly the second most powerful politician in America, Kamala Harris, of course, her mother grew up in India and her father grew up in Jamaica. And as a result of that, they gave birth to somebody who is now in a very powerful position. It's the same in the United Kingdom. As it happens, possibly the second most powerful politician in the United Kingdom is the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Finance Secretary. His name is Rishi Sunak. His parents also came from India when he was young. So there is a possibility to move in this world. And the way to move is you've got to make the best of your current situation, decide which resources online to cherish, and also, very importantly, decide who are the people you're going to spend most of your time with. Because we are, by some estimates, in a way, the average of the 5 people we spend most of our time with. So wherever we are, we have still some choice as to who our most closest friends are. Let's pick them carefully, not in a calculating way, but in a thoughtful way that means that our better natures will be reinforced by them, and they will help us to live up to our true potential rather than being distracted or falling short.
Mhm. Thank you, sir. Mr. David Shumaker, what do you want to say about this?
I want to say that we're fortunate that we live in these times and that we can do sessions like we're doing right now, having people in 3 different parts of the world being able to talk and have a discussion like this. And that's not limited to us, of course, and it's not limited to the UK or the United States or anywhere else from that standpoint. The proliferation of cell phones have allowed this to happen throughout the country of Africa, and really it probably depends more on backbone structure, things like Wi-Fi and internet capabilities. But I would say that when you have those available, we can do what we're doing right now. We can have discussions, but we can also have learning situations, and you can keep on learning. I am myself decided to go back, and I'm actually taking university courses on a daily basis again now. Now I'm doing that from the United States, but this can be done from anywhere. And I love the idea of the micro courses or the nano courses, which we see advertised. If you have an area of interest in a particular area, you can do that. What it comes down to is that we're really fortunate to be living in the start of the 21st century, where we have these items available, and I wholeheartedly agree to take advantage of the education, the networking that this allows us to do. And between those two things, those will go a very long way.
Mhm. Thank you. So this kind of questions actually from small medium enterprise and small organization always we get. I think they are looking some solution from today's sessions. Araf Mehraj, this is another good question that, sir, how do I motivate my team in critical situation? I'm sure maybe he has to run a team, and now in the COVID period they are in critical situation. Do you have any innovative strategy or solution for him and for his organization?
Well, I would say that it comes down to emotion. I can lay
Mhm.
out a plan in front of people, and I can say, here's where we are. I can get agreement on where we want to go, and I can assign tasks. Those are some of the things that leaders do. But if there isn't an emotional attachment to wanting to move forward onto those, it just doesn't happen. So in sports, you'll see the coach, the manager of the team give a motivational speech to their players. Yes, they've done the practice. They all know their individual jobs. They practice together. But that motivational speech is that uh, fire that's going to take people out there to be able to perform their best. And I think that's what we need to do with our teams when we have a situation like that.
Mhm. Yes, Mr. David Wood. Yeah.
Well, there is a lot of research as to what causes change initiatives to fail. There's a lot of research onto why people aren't able to motivate teams to respond properly to critical situations. Perhaps some of the listeners have heard of the writer John Cotter. His surname is spelt Kotter. He's written over many decades some very impressive books on this subject. Perhaps the most famous one is a book called Leading Change. And in that, he describes 8 main causes of failures of this kind of change initiatives. And the 2 top failures both come back to the points that David Shumaker was just making. The most common reason why change initiatives fail is lack of a sense of urgency.
Mhm.
People
Mhm.
feel, well, yes, I suppose this is important, but we can deal with it later on. I'm not keen to complicate my life just now. I've got my current set of objectives, my current tasks. These other things that my leader is talking about, well, I guess intellectually it's right, but I don't feel it personally. So lack of a sense of urgency, lack of realizing that things need to change fast, otherwise the bad consequences will happen. And the
Mhm.
second most significant cause of lack of change is a lack of a compelling, credible, positive vision. It's not enough just to point out that there is danger, which needs to be tackled. There needs to be a practical set of steps that can result in change. Not just vague words, not just, hey, let's go to the moon, as Kennedy says, but some more details. How are we going to go to the moon? And if I can jump down further into his list, it might be number 4 or 5 on Cotter's list. It's lack of identifying and celebrating small steps forwards. If the team is complaining, you've got to be able to show them something small and quick that can be done to make things a bit better. And so you need to figure out what is an agile step forwards. And in my own set of leadership skills, I've already mentioned analysis and imagination as a pair that goes together. I would pick as the second pair agility and nurturing. Agility means the ability to break down a big, difficult task into something where you can make a small, meaningful step forwards quickly. And nurturing is to provide the emotional intelligence, the support and comforting to encourage people not to be afraid of the change, not to be too critical of failures, but to embrace each other and support each other.
Mhm. Thank you. I want to take this advice, Mr. Alexandria. We would need a better idea of his needs to know which projects might be a good for fit. Another things, I think this is very common. Greetings from Malaysia, Nur Fazrin. My question is, our honorable guess is that leaders are born, not made. According to the statement, is that necessary to practicing some skills in childhood to become a leader? Thanks a lot. Yes, Mr. David Wood.
Well, I believe people can change. I believe leaders can be made rather than having to be born. Of course, we do inherit some special characteristics in our genes. And of course, the first few years of our lives have an unusually big influence on the rest of what we do. But one of the great insights of most religions is that humans can change. Some religions talk about being reborn or discovering a new purpose in life, leaving behind your old ways. So I do believe that people can change. And I believe that leadership is a set of skills that can be taught, rather than somebody saying, hey, I wasn't born knowing mathematics, so therefore I can't become a mathematician. I wasn't born knowing the laws of economics, therefore I can't become an economist. My answer is, hey, they can be taught. And it's the same with teaching leadership. It can be taught too. Of course, we will be different. We won't lose our own individuality, but despite our individuality, each of us can become leaders of particular types.
Mhm. Yes. Mr. David Shumaker.
Yes, I agree as well. I think the fact that somebody asks the question says that they have the desire to be a leader, and when you start with that desire, then it comes to taking the bold step of putting yourself out there to do that. I spent quite a number of years in the United States Air Force. And when I went in, I did have a desire to want to step forward and lead, but I had to put myself out there to do that. And that was uncomfortable at times. And hopefully that meant that people saw that there was some type of leadership uh, desire in me and that was worth developing. So I was able to get help from those who already were leaders that wanted to invest in me to bring me along as a leader. Perhaps some of this came because I was firstborn in the family and had that firstborn child syndrome where I always wanted to be leading, my younger brother and sister, that sort of thing. But it started with that desire, and then it started with putting myself out there and then gathering strength from those that wanted to build the leader in me. And then it was rinse and repeat, keep doing this over and over and over. So change is definitely possible, but change takes active work and it takes desire. But anybody that's asking the question, can I change to do this, is already on that path, and it can be done.
Mhm. Mhm. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I think the audience has huge question regarding leaderships and this kind of things. Abiyaz Mustain, good morning, sir. How do we measure success for we as a leaders? Like how we can measure the success and other things, Mr. David Wood.
Well, there's an important motto I think it's worth bearing in mind, Abias, which is that successful people have more failures than failures do. That might seem strange, but if you think about it, it makes sense. Often the most successful people have many things that go wrong in their lives. But
Mhm.
what's important is that they have learned to fail forwards, which means that when things go wrong, they don't try and forget it. They don't try and block it out of their mind. They don't try and deny what happened. They actually think, well, I have learned something. I have learned that if I do this, it didn't work in these circumstances. And they're able then to try something differently. There's three kinds of advice about failures. One is to fail forwards. Another is to fail smart, which means that we shouldn't celebrate every failure. It is worth thinking about things before we do them. And there are some failures that can really be criticized because people didn't actually do the necessary upfront thinking. But there's many things that we can't know in advance reasonably, and it is therefore appropriate to be able to test things out. Hence, the third of the phrases, we need to be good at failing fast. Failing fast is that you identify what's uncertain and you do an experiment quite soon to try and learn whether which way the land lies there. So that comes back to the overall skill of agility that I mentioned earlier. Agility isn't just a buzzword, it is a set of practical skills. People should look it up, absolutely, what is meant by agility. It's applied in the world of software development, but it is more applicable than just that. And part of it is figuring out what you want to do in your next sprint, which is your next short experiment, and figuring out not just what is going to help you to move forwards reliably, but sometimes you want to prioritize an experiment that will give you the knowledge, which will then help you to figure out which way to go forwards. So I'm sorry that doesn't exactly answer the question of how do we know who is most successful, but it emphasizes the point. We should not be afraid of failure. We should turn failure into our ally, provided we're doing it in a smart way, provided we are seeking to fail fast, and absolutely seeking to fail forwards.
Thank you, sir. Mr. David Shumaker, yes.
Yeah, one of the things that I would say is make sure to take the long view when you're looking at defining success and failure. Looking at the short view, many times you'll see many more failures than successes, and perhaps that becomes unmotivating. But taking the long view, but to take the long view, I think it starts with conceptualizing, perhaps writing down, talking to other people about what you see success looks like. Because at times, especially when you're taking the long view, you might be in the stress of the daily battle, if you will, of moving forward in a project. And you may be so obsessed with that idea of, gee, how hard this is. It's not going as fast as I want. I'm not getting the buy-in that I want. Stop and take a look at the long plan and see where it fits. That, for me, helps comfort me many times as I realize is, yes, I'm in a tough spot right now, but I'm still moving forward towards the goal that I want. And maybe I need to readjust timelines. Maybe I can adjust them sooner or later. But keeping it all in perspective is really important. Now, going back to leadership, for the other people that are on our team, for the other people that we work with, let's offer that to them as well. And let's keep that grand goal in mind. When we have somebody that's working on a project with you and their part of the project doesn't come out as well as we would have hoped, I think it's very important to be able to offer encouragement and to be able to also not have that person have to worry about what failure is going to look like in someone else's eyes. They're probably judging themselves even harder than maybe what the other people on the team can do. So take the long view, make sure that you understand what success looks like and where you're at in that. And that's how you can stay motivated, and that's how you can help motivate the other people that you work with.
Thank you. Sir, one specific point, like example in the just the US election procedures is just finishing right now. Then we find that US is a #1 economy in the big country, and they practice democracy well, and they have many intellectual hub and many more things. But with this present conditions, with these elections and other things, we saw some divisions in between US communities, and find that US leaders come up with the different idea which is not actually relevant with the cultures. They are blaming each other, they are complaining against each other, their complaints against the systems, many things happening. So what is it a good example for the global community? What will be the future of this kind of leaderships, and how we should like maintain our strategy and other things for like when uh, we team up with any leaderships and when we elected any president or prime ministers, how we think positively in 21st century, even though we are finding many negative things happening around the world. What's your observation? I want to start with Mr. David Shumaker. You are from USA, then I will go for Mr. David Wood.
Yes, of course, the current election, even after the election seems to have declared a winner, if you will, even that is divisive uh, as we move on. Uh, but the leaders at all levels uh, can. This is tough for me. I have some of my own emotions tied up in this. What I want to see is a more reasonable discussion of issues and less wedge issues trying to force people into one corner or another. I guess where I come from that is that leaders at all levels have this ability, perhaps even responsibility, to want to talk about how we can move forward together. And that starts with not uh, uh, it starts by taking the personal out of it and talking about policy. So we can disagree over policy if we can keep the personal aspects out of it. And it's really difficult with some of the things that we have that are going on now. I'm actually very interested in hearing what David Wood has to say, because perhaps somebody from the outside looking in that maybe doesn't feel, I don't know, I don't want to speak for you, but I have such an emotional investment in this. This is actually a very tough question for me.
Mhm. Thank you, sir. Mr. David Wood. Yes, how do you want to analyze this point?
It is an emotional thing because the actions of the leaders of the largest countries have such impact around the world. And America has such a potential for being a good actor around the world. But to the extent that any country is focused first on itself, it is actually less useful and less of a leader. So when various people in the existing American regime talked about America first, America first, America first, I felt bad about that. And it's the same, I
Mhm.
have to say, with some of the current leadership in the United Kingdom. When they say, hey, we in Britain, we can be world leading. Again, I am suspicious of such an approach. I would much rather that the skill of collaboration was practiced. This brings me to another couple of skills that I think are important for leaders in the future. It's collaboration and politics. Collaboration is the ability to realize that other people can bring part of the solution, even if they have different viewpoints from us. And I'm encouraged so far by what I have heard the president-elect, Joe Biden, saying. He has said that we must not regard each other as enemies. Of course, we may have opposing views, but still, let's find a way to work together. And I think at the world level, absolutely, we need that attitude as well. Most of the problems we are facing at the world level cannot be solved by countries thinking of themselves first, trying to cover up things that would make their own country look bad. The spread of the coronavirus was caused in the early days by two countries covering up what they knew because they didn't want the apparent bad news to leak out. So in the very early days in China, the news of the seriousness of the coronavirus was covered up, and the fact that it could spread from person to person was covered up. That was a failure at that stage. Now, the Chinese leadership have since made many amends and are to be congratulated for that. Likewise, when the coronavirus did come to America, President Trump was fully informed straight away how serious it was. And he admitted to the veteran journalist, Bob Woodward, some of the older listeners may know, was also involved in the loss of office of the previous President Richard Nixon. So he's a veteran journalist. He persuaded President Trump in the beginning of the year to put on record some of his understanding. And he said, yes, he knew how serious this coronavirus was, but he took the decision to cover it up because he wanted the American stock exchange to continue to do well. That was a very short-sighted and self-centered approach, and it has proved counterproductive. But at the same time, there are many in America and in Britain and in every country who are demonstrating the servant leadership rather than the selfish leadership. And if we want to look at some shining examples, I'm very impressed by what the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, is doing. She is focusing on flourishing rather than simply on economic well-being, and she communicates in a way that reaches across the aisle. There are other inspiring examples. I think what's happened in Taiwan has been remarkable too. We tend not to hear so much about Taiwan because it's got a very difficult political situation in the shadow of mainland China, which really wants to extinguish that independence in Taiwan. But what they've done there is remarkable too. And I point to one of their junior government appointees, a software engineer called Audrey Tang. And she has focused on transforming the discussions in that country away from what she describes as anti-social social media to pro-social social media. Systems of software that doesn't lead people to identify each other as enemies, software that doesn't lead people to want to criticize bitterly people who are different, who have done that. Instead, they can encourage collaboration. So there are some positive examples, but my goodness, we need more of that collaborative leadership. So I am seriously hoping that there will be a collaboration emerging in America, that there will be some Republicans joining the cabinet that President-elect Biden puts together, as well as people from the various wings of the Democratic Party, because we need people to collaborate, because actually the best insights are not owned exclusively by any one party. They are often appreciated in various ways by people with very different backgrounds. And in order to be able to hear these insights, we need to move away from this confrontational enemy focus into a view that says we are all parts of the human family and we should move forwards together.
Yes, thank you, sir. This is some of the good example you are coming up with the with these things. But beside that, I want to know. Let's say in USA, let's say this election, it gets huge media coverage, right? Many people, even myself, I engage with debating communities, and in 2013, you can check that we become world champion in USL rounds, and we do debate in Oxford Union, Cambridge Union, and Harvard Unions. But we learn debate from US presidential debate. Even I'm from Bangladesh, from its very small places. I shared this point that we learn debate from, example, this Clinton debate. But this time, I'm very honest with you, I do not find that I can learn something. Even the youth community can learn something, because fact is that USA debate, like presidential debate, presidential elections, you are talking about New Zealand, you are talking about some of the good leaders, but USA has more exposure. That is the reality. UK has better exposure. That is the reality. So when these things happen, uh, do you think that, and I'm sure for the, I encourage debating and this kind of thing because of this USA culture, democracy, and these things. So when it's happen, it's a threat for the leaderships. It's a bad example for the global community, and global community become frustrated that, okay, we do not have a good hope for that. We have some sort of leaders. The leaders always blaming each others. They are creating the negative things, and which is not a good things. Even example, I'm sorry to say, like how I see the first debate, it was actually no analysis, no basic examples, and no good idea. So my question is that, what is the system error? How come this kind of peoples become the leaders of a great country, a big economy? I don't know. Maybe there are some system error. Can you identify these things or analyze this point? Because I get a huge question for the youth community from the organization. They want to know, the people from you, they do not have answer. They want to know that what's going on, what is the futures. So
Well, I think the future is, at least I would hope the future would be more voices instead of less voices. When a debate is down to two sides and you only have two sides to choose from, you get this entrenched attitude. And the idea of a debate is to win. So I would love to see debates open here to more viewpoints. Nationally, in the United States, there were three political parties on the ballot. There were the Democrats, there were the Republicans, and there were the Libertarians. It would have been much better to have also had libertarians in those presidential debates. And then to have strict debate rules, of course, especially as you're referring to the first presidential debate where it seemed like the rules didn't apply. But having more voices seemed to help. Back in March of this year, I attended in Chicago an open debate for president, and many minor party candidates were there. And there were so many that we had to have two sessions. So we had half of the candidates for 2 hours, and then we had the rest of the candidates, the other half, for 2 hours. And it was a very refreshing thing to see. The Transhumanist Party, we had somebody that was represented there, as did Libertarians and Greens and many other parties. And I came away with really quite an appreciation for very wide views that were out there that really, really need to be heard. So I think if we're talking about looking at solution, how we can do this better on the national stage, it means bringing more of those type of voices in and giving them some time to talk as well. Perhaps the main party allegiances stay with Democrats and the Republicans for a long time, but I think it does everybody a real service. You also mentioned about how the media covers that. When you have two sides, it's like two sides of a sporting event. And you have cheering for your team and you don't want the other team to win, and it becomes a race. And I think that opening up discussion across broader viewpoints takes it out of this sports arena type of way of looking at politics and having a discourse of what are the different issues and perhaps having a little more time for each one of the nuances. So I've got some ideas of how we can do this, and they're not my ideas alone, but I think those are the kind of things that we need to do with America on the national stage and talking about how we move policy forward.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Mr. David Wood, yes.
So I think you're right, Sharif. There is a system error taking place there, which is the fact that it is a two-party state, as David Shumaker has mentioned. It would be far better if it wasn't a first past the post voting system, but there's a voting system that had a transferable vote, as, for example, the Transhumanist Party itself in the USA uses for its own internal purposes. That would allow you to say, well, actually, my first preference is for this minority party. I don't expect them to succeed, but I'm going to put my first preference there. And then I'm going to put my second preference here, and my third preference here, and my fourth preference there. And it gives you the confidence that you can actually express yourself in such a way. But it's very difficult for new parties to break into this log jam. Now, there are some inspiring people in the main parties. A couple of weeks ago, I saw the former US President Barack Obama giving what I thought was a remarkably good talk, a spirited talk, one that was well constructed. It had bits of evidence, it had a call to action, it was a collaboration. Last night here in the United Kingdom, a former Prime Minister, John Major, he was the one who took off after Margaret Thatcher. He was Prime Minister in Britain from 1990 to 1997. He gave a talk last night, which again was brilliantly constructed. He was criticizing the current government, even though it's from the same party as him, Conservatives. He was saying that what the current government is doing is selfish and short-sighted and is not for the good of the country. And partly as a result of his intervention, the upper house in Parliament in the United Kingdom, the House of Lords, voted very strongly against something the current government is trying to do. So there is inspiring people in the other parties, but it would be better if there was a change to a more modern proportional representation transferable vote system. And then there's the other system error, which both of you have mentioned, which is the power of money and the power of media to distort things. It would be far better if there were limits on how much money could be spent in political undertaking. Lawrence Lessig, the renowned lawyer, has highlighted this many times in terms of the problems with American politics, that it is determined by the wealthy. It would be far better if there were limits on that, and particularly if the media had less of a dominant role. So what the media are doing is they're painting false narratives, frankly. What's being said on organizations such as Fox News, it is highlighting false stories again and again, which is causing people to honestly think that the situation is one way, when in fact it is made up. And the journalists at Fox News know full well what they're doing. They know full well that many things they're saying are false, but they're doing it because that's what their lords and masters are asking them to do. And we have to reform the system so that there is not so much power in the hands of anyone. And without proper functioning of the courts of law, without proper functioning of media, without the possibilities of a variety of democratic alternatives, then we will have more of this system failure. So what I'm hoping Joe Biden can do as he takes power, with help from the opposition parties, is to institute some political reforms, which will mean that we don't have this bad situation repeating. But it's not just an American problem, as I've said. There are lots of issues in the United Kingdom too, alas.
Yes, thank you, sir, for a very good analysis. Beside that, I want to know, let's say, in the crisis period, actually leadership has to prove themselves. A leader that in the COVID-19 situation, every country has problem. Example, Malaysia to Britain's to USA, Africa, Asia, everywhere has problem. So in that situations, actually, leader has to prove that I am capable to handle this kind of crisis. But in these situations, actually, yes, there are many good examples already you give from around the world, and beside that, many leaders cannot prove themselves that okay, we can handle this crisis period in a proper way. What your advice? How they can prove themselves? How they can manage the critical situations? What the strategy they can take in the COVID-19 situations? What's your advice and guideline?
Well, my partner is from New Zealand, so I get New Zealand news on a daily basis. And I think New Zealand, Taiwan as well, but I think New Zealand is probably a very good example, especially as you bring up COVID-19. They were getting ready to go into election season in New Zealand when COVID-19 hit, and the prime minister there took bold action to lock down the country and to try to rally people to cooperate. And I would say that that played out very well, but it did take bold action to do that. And I've mentioned that earlier, that part of being a leader is doing that, is taking bold action and then encouraging those to follow. Here in the United States, we have a federal government, but we also have 50 states, and their governors have many more power over the daily lives of citizens than the president does. So, at least to my liking, our president didn't take the kind of leadership that I would want to see. But as you look around to the other 50 examples that are here, we see various levels of that. But my opinion is fortified in the fact that the ones that did take bold, aggressive steps fared well, and their jurisdictions fared much better than those that didn't. So I live in Arizona. This started in a few places around the U.S. There was some in Washington State and some in California, but New York's the one that was first in the news. And we saw the governor of the state of New York take very deliberate action, and I believe that it played out pretty well there. We saw our governor here in Arizona, different political party, take good action to begin with, and then maybe took his foot off the gas a little bit as time went on, wanting to build the economy. And we didn't do as bad as some other parts of the country, but we have 51 different examples here. But I want to say that bold, immediate action, like we saw in New Zealand and then as we saw in different states here in the United States, plays a very big part of that.
Yes, Mr. David Wood.
So what we need today is leaders who have true competence rather than focusing on ideological purity. Now, it doesn't matter. Here's a quote from Deng Xiaoping, who took over from Mao Zedong as the leader of China. He said, "It doesn't matter whether the cat is white or black, so long as it can catch mice." You know? And so we shouldn't worry whether somebody is politically a Republican or politically Democratic or politically libertarian. What is more important is they can actually get involved in practical progress rather than just trying to decide who is in the good side and who is in the bad side. The famous writer Philip Tetlock, whose book Super Forecasters I recommend, he did a long-running project in which people were asked to make forecasts as to what would happen in the next few years. And the ones who did best over a long period of time were the ones who were not at all ideological. They were willing to approach questions from multiple points of view. He draws the distinction between two character types, quoting the famous philosopher Isaiah Berlin. There's somebody, you're either a hedgehog or a fox. The hedgehog knows one thing and it knows it very well. The fox knows many things. I think this quotes an old Greek tale. But anyway, come back to the point. Philip Tetlock's analysis was those who just know one thing fared very badly in this forecasting exercises. They always tended to see things through their own ideological lens. But in reality, we need to be able to take off our ideological filters and see things clearly. And hence the fox that was willing to learn many things is more successful. So the great leaders of the future who will help us through these troubled times are those who are able to cooperate with people from all political hues and persuade the people from all political hues to leave behind some of their ideological presuppositions, because these ideologies, frankly, they're from the past and the future is more complicated than the past.
Yes, thank you, sir. There are more questions, actually, audience has. I want to take from them. Mohammad Shohel Rana, his question is that, thank you. Are political parties the only place to practice leadership? What is the role of universities and organization in this case? And another question, Shahrukh Shumon, hello, sir. What is the most difficult part of making a leadership?
Well, David, when you go.
Okay. What I was going to say is leadership is everywhere. Politics right now is in the news, but also leadership is in science, it's in engineering, it's in medicine, it's in art, it's everywhere that we look. So people that see themselves as leaders don't have to look to just one narrow area like politics. Now, politics touches many things, but then so does science and engineering, and that's what interests me and what I really want to get into politics. So, no, it's just to answer the question directly, politics is not the only place. I've been most influenced by I've been greatly influenced by reading books from Steven Pinker, for example, who is a college professor. I've been influenced greatly by science and engineering writers. I've been influenced greatly by science fiction, painting a picture of what the possible future might be like, and that too is an artistic version of what leadership is like, as well as great music and as well as art. So leadership is everywhere. Wherever you feel drawn to move forward, that's where you should go.
It's true. There are multiple ways in which you can demonstrate leadership. But I do emphasize that understanding politics is going to become more important in the future than in the past. And one of the skills that I say that leaders in the future will need is better skills in politics. I don't just mean everyday politics with a small p, which means working with different people in your university, your business, or your organization. I mean, it is influencing what the politicians who are leading the country are doing. Now, you don't need to be a politician to do that, but you do need to understand some of the political forces. And whereas in the past, many people could shrug their shoulders and say politics is messy, they don't want anything to do with it. I say now that the most important decisions of the future need political involvement too. For example, what kinds of jobs will most people be doing in the future? Well, the reality is in a few decades, there won't be jobs for most people. And if we want a good income, we will need politicians to have changed the social contract, to have come up with something similar to a universal basic income or so. If you think you can avoid politics and fare well, that is a dangerous assumption. So we all need to become more educated about politics, because we don't all need to become full-time politicians, but we need to know how to influence politicians. In terms of the question raised by Shahrukh Sumon, what is the most difficult part of making leadership? Well, perhaps I will say that we got to continually reinvent ourselves. That if we think we've arrived, we are at risk of falling back. So whatever skill we have learned, whatever new attributes we have gained, it's probably not going to be sufficient to keep us as the great leader in the future. So we need the humility to keep on learning new things, to keep on changing. And that requires some self-knowledge. It also requires us to have very good friends who can speak to us candidly and say, you know, this was wonderful, but next time, how about doing things differently in this way? So that a commitment to continuous progress is hard and challenging, but is truly essential.
Yes. Thank you. I think, is it the question or anything comments? Universal basic services and stake in assets. Okay. So anyway, so I directly want to go for the concluding remarks for today's, because like we come up with a very interesting idea. We come up with the some of the good examples of leaders and how they should play roles in the COVID situations, and what will be the basic strategy, at least the youth community they can follow. They are developing their leadership and this kind of things. Beside that, actually World Talent Economy Forum, Asia Research and Development Institute, Al Noor Academy, we are working together for developing a knowledge-based community. And I really want to give you thanks, because both of you actually supporting a lot for World Talent Economy Forums. So we have a plan to do different summit and conference. So definitely we want to do more focus on this leadership summit. So definitely in between this month, based on your availability, we will arrange and we will invite different scholars from different countries for this leadership summit. It's based on your available date and everything. So thank you for your valuable times and everything. And directly we want to go for the concluding remarks. Before that, I want to give special thanks to our audience, those who regularly join with us, come up with different questions and different things, and this is really inspire us a lot. And regularly, actually, we are trying to engage with the youth community and trying to give them support. Already with the Cambrian Educations Group, we have 10,000 students. We are collaborating, we are supporting the 10,000 young minds and young and brilliant peoples. Hopefully, by this way, step by step, we will grow more, and we are communicating more youth community, and we will share all of your content and everything 100% free for them. We do not take any charge or anything. We make everything 100% free. So by this way, hopefully, many young community, at least they get guidelines. At least they can know that what will be the strategy for USA, for UK. Maybe in the real time they do not get chance to engage with you, but through this process, maybe more of the young people they getting a knowledge-based community and guideline. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I want to go for the concluding remarks. I want to start from Mr. David Shumaker, then I want to go for Mr. David Wood.
Yes, well, thank you, Sharif. I enjoy coming here and having these discussions, but more importantly, I think, as I really appreciate that I see the work that you're doing and the world Talent Economic Forum. By having these discussions, this is a great value that you're putting out there. So you mentioned that you don't charge, but you are offering something of great value in return, and that is to be applauded. I also want to thank David Wood for being here and talking today. When it comes to Futurist leadership, this is someone that has been doing this for quite a while. And I remember, David, when I met you, I think back in 2016, the first time out at RadFest in California, I was really happy to be able to associate with so many futurist leaders that are telling a positive message, telling a realistic message, and encouraging people to go forward. So what you're doing here, Sharif, is awesome, bringing this kind of talent and exposing people to that. So thank you very much for having me here today.
Thank you. Thank you. I think there is last questions. If you want, you can add, consider future the strategies. I think Pavel, yes. Yes, Mr.
Well, that's a great question, and not to spend too much time in it, because I think we're coming to the end of the time span. It's both. Foresight is indeed predicting the trends that need more attention, but true foresight is creative as well. It opens people's minds to new possibilities, good possibilities and bad possibilities. And some forecasts are intended to be self-fulfilling. By highlighting them, it encourages people to make them happen, like Kennedy's "We can go to the moon" and back this decade. Other forecasts are intended to be self-unfulfilling by prophesying problems with accelerating climate change. People are hoping that it won't happen like that. So there is a creative aspect to foresight as well as the predictive aspect to foresight. My advice to especially the youth listening in here is, I'll go back to the point I made earlier. Pick your friends and colleagues with some thoughtfulness and care. Of course, we have a loyalty to our friends, but if we are spending a lot of time with people who are persistently complaining, persistently ideological, persistently divisive, then we have to maybe consider there are better people to spend more of our time with that will help us to be more in line with our best possibilities. And not just thinking who do we spend our time with, but what do we spend our time viewing and reading and watching. I encourage everybody here to find out what's going on at the US Transhumanist Party's virtual salons. There are usually on Sundays fascinating discussions that go more deeply into many of the topics that have been touched on here. I encourage listeners to also look out London Futurists. There have been a number of very interesting discussions recently, and more are forthcoming. And to spend time reading some of the books and articles that are mentioned on these sites. It's a discipline, but it's a discipline that should pay back well. I want to acknowledge the work of David Shumaker and others in the remarkable progress that's been made in the US Transhumanist Party. They are pulling together a diverse set of people who are showing the best aspects of humanity in my ways. And Sharif, I want to acknowledge you finally for bringing these shows together and making them freely available, building step by step into something that can really impact not just a few people, but the entire world. So my hat comes off to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So still audience has a huge questions. Sorry, I'm really, really sorry. I know that there are, and I want to share one point of view that everything organic. From the beginning, World Talent Economy Forums, I really focused on the organic way with my teams and everywhere. So I know that they have many questions. So we are trying to arrange a summit. So hopefully you join in our summit. And definitely the summit also will be definitely free for this time. So if you have any questions about these leaderships and futuristic idea and everything, you can join these sessions, and hopefully based on our guest availability and our other guest availability, hopefully this month we will make a leadership summit, and by this way we can convey good messages and good guidelines and support for the youth community. Thank you for your valuable time, and it's really really interesting sessions. You are observing many people still come up with the questions and many more things. They're not stopping, so they will ask me more questions, so hopefully I will add more question for you and next time in the summit. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable time. Thank you.